In the dim corridors of forgotten history, where dust-choked shelves conceal secrets too dangerous for daylight, 4 files bear the mark of deliberate erasure, under the ominous heading 4 Shocking WWII files that governments erased. These documents surface like restless ghosts, whispering truths the victors swore would never be spoken. They are fragments of the world's darkest conflict, moments buried not out of obscurity, but because their exposure threatened to unravel fragile post-war alliances and reputations. Beneath the smoldering ruins of cities, on shattered airfields and frozen forests, betrayals unfolded behind the front lines, while official histories looked the other way. Each story carries the weight of names crossed out in ink, coordinates burned from maps, and testimonies silenced in backroom deals. The brittle paper smells of smoke and mildew, a reminder of the fires and floods used to wipe them clean. Tonight, you will walk the corridors of forbidden archives, guided by flickering light and the pulse of suppressed history. These are not legends or rumors. They are the classified remnants of a war rewritten by those who won it. Chapter 1. Classified Massacre beneath Dresden's ruins. Under the charred skyline of Dresden in February 1945, a hidden narrative unfolded beneath the roar of British Lancaster bombers and the orange glow of firestorms. Official records long portrayed Dresden solely as a cultural tragedy of Allied bombing, but a sealed Reich Main Security Office (RSHA) dossier, labelled Aktenvermerk ZW17, reveals a clandestine operation executed by Einsatzgruppe D. As incendiary bombs turned Baroque spires into skeletons of stone, SS units funneled hundreds of political prisoners, dissidents, and captured resistance members into subterranean vaults beneath Zwinger Palace. The basements, once home to art treasures, became temporary prisons, dark, suffocating chambers, lit only by flickering oil lamps. Witnesses spoke of muffled executions timed to coincide with bomb detonations, the echoes of gunfire swallowed by collapsing masonry above. One surviving fragment, an intercepted Abwehr message dated 15 February 1945, recorded a terse phrase, "All noise covered. Proceed with cleansing." The document's edges were singed, suggesting a hasty attempt to destroy it. Soviet troops who later reached the city found certain vaults sealed under collapsed stonework, but no formal investigation was pursued. British intelligence, aware through ultra-decrypts, allegedly struck an informal arrangement with the Soviets to omit mention of SS purges in exchange for access to captured German scientists. MI6 operative diaries from spring 1945, some unearthed in the London estate sale in 1989, include references to Dresden anomalies, a euphemism for mass civilian executions under the cover of chaos. The firebombing of Dresden was catastrophic. Temperatures reached 1,500 degrees, creating a firestorm that consumed oxygen and suffocated thousands. Amid this horror, Einsatzgruppe D's actions were camouflaged perfectly. The flames that devoured Baroque masterpieces also obliterated evidence. When the Zwinger complex was rebuilt in the 1950s, construction crews allegedly discovered skeletal remains mixed with melted glass and twisted iron beams. Yet East German authorities sealed the area, citing unexploded ordnance as the reason. A confidential Stasi memo from 1963, classified nur für den Dienstgebrauch, instructed archivists to remove all references to ZW17 from public records. The British Foreign Office's Cold War calculus also played a role. By 1946, Britain needed Soviet cooperation in Berlin and Eastern Europe. Publicizing an SS atrocity that occurred while Allied bombs fell might have sparked Soviet propaganda that Britain had indirectly abetted Nazi massacres. Thus, references disappeared from casualty counts. Historian Dr. Elise Markham, who examined fragments of the RSHA dossier in 1997, described faint pencil annotations. Erased for Stability, London, 1946. She found corroboration in the private letters of Major Alan Devereux, an MI6 field officer who wrote to his wife, "We trade silence for a future balance. The dead beneath Dresden will have no memorial." The massacre's victims remain largely nameless. Sparse Gestapo intake logs, reference transfers from Buchenwald and Flossenburg, with prisoner designations marked Sonderbehandlung, a euphemism for execution. Among them were rumoured to be members of the German resistance group Kreisau Circle and captured French Maquis leaders. The SS commanders on site vanished into the chaos of Germany's collapse. many adopting false identities or fleeing into Soviet-controlled territories where records became irretrievable. In post-war West Germany, archivists attempting to catalogue Dresden's bombing casualties occasionally stumbled upon unexplained discrepancies. Hundreds of unaccounted for individuals whose paperwork ended abruptly in February 1945. Attempts to reconcile the missing were dismissed by authorities eager to maintain the bombing narrative as a solely Allied-inflicted tragedy. In 1978, East German defector Karl-Heinz Merton provided testimony to a BBC journalist, alleging he had seen sealed Stasi files referencing Operation ZW17 and its role in eliminating politically undesirable elements under the cover of bombardment. His account was quietly buried after national security consultations with West German intelligence. The ruins of Dresden's old city hold architectural splendor rebuilt from ashes, but beneath its cobblestones, the weight of silent screams lingers. Tour guides speak of the Baroque beauty and Allied firebombing, never of the vaults where prisoners were shot in darkness as the city burned. The existence of ZW17 was too destabilizing for post-war narratives, too damaging to the fragile image of clear-cut moral divides. Its erasure speaks not only to Nazi brutality, but to the uncomfortable compromises of victors willing to trade truth for expediency. In the end, Dresden's story was rewritten not just by flames, but by deliberate hands, ensuring that beneath every reconstruction stone, the ghosts of the forgotten remain unheard. Chapter 2: Forbidden Pact at St. Lo Airfield. In the shattered fields of Normandy, amid the summer heat of 1944, St. Lo was a name already etched into the blood-soaked maps of Allied command. Known as the capital of ruins, after relentless bombing, its airfield lay in smouldering disarray, torn runways, twisted fuselages, and the acrid scent of burned fuel. Beneath the wreckage, a secret accord unfolded that both Washington and Berlin later scrubbed from their histories. Declassified fragments labeled Operation Copper Star reveal a dangerous convergence. The Office of Strategic Services, OSS, and remnants of the Wehrmacht's Abwehr quietly negotiating under the blackened skies. On the night of July 30, 1944, with tracer fire still glowing on distant horizons, 3 OSS operatives in American fatigues crossed a field lined with shattered hedgerows to meet Oberst Heinrich Vogt, a German intelligence officer desperate to defect with his precious cargo, a complete set of V-2 rocket schematics, and a list of launch coordinates for sites along the Dutch coast. The meeting was not sanctioned by Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, SHIEF. Instead, it was orchestrated by a rogue cell within OSS's Special Operations Branch, headed by a handler codenamed Archer. Archer's personal notes, later recovered from a burned courier pouch in 1947, mention Copper Star, St. Lo, success ensured by silence. Witness testimony from a French resistance fighter, Jacques Lenoir, describes seeing low-burning lanterns flickering on the cracked tarmac as shadowed figures exchanged documents for safe passage guarantees. The Germans, aware their war was collapsing, saw salvation in bargaining their way westward rather than facing the Soviets' wrath. Vogt's family, his wife and 2 children, waited in a concealed truck on the edge of a bomb crater, their breaths shallow as artillery rumbled far away. By dawn, the documents were gone, Vogt and his family vanished, and St. Lo's airfield was once again just a ruin among ruins. Official Allied communiques reported no unusual activity. The British Special Operations Executive, SOE, excluded from the operation, reportedly discovered traces of the meeting through intercepted signals traffic. A now missing SOE memo dated August 4, 1944, referenced unexplained American movement at St. Lo, warning that premature Western acquisition of German technology could destabilize the fragile Allied-Soviet alliance. Churchill's government, already wary of Roosevelt's willingness to maneuver outside established channels, pressed for silence. The memo disappeared from SOE archives by 1950, likely shredded under routine clearance. The stakes surrounding V-2 technology were immense. By late 1944, the V-2 rocket was the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile, capable of striking London without warning. Hitler hoped these weapons would reverse Germany's fortunes. For the OSS, capturing the schematics without Soviet knowledge was an irresistible prize. American records from Fort Hunt interrogations of German scientists in 1945 hint at pre-capture briefings suggesting prior Allied possession of rocket details, an implication only explained by a clandestine transaction like Copper Star. St. Lo itself bore no witness. Its people, traumatized by bombings that flattened 95% of their town, had neither the means nor the will to probe strange movements on the airfield's corpse. By 1946, reconstruction erased the cratered runway, pouring new concrete over the scars. Decades later, aerial surveys of Normandy revealed faint anomalies in the subsoil beneath the airfield's surface, disturbed earth in patterns consistent with makeshift caches or hastily buried containers. Archaeologists found only fragments of wartime debris, but one object, a brass nameplate etched Vogt, surfaced briefly before vanishing into a private collection. In Cold War years, whispers of Operation Copper Star circulated among intelligence veterans. In 1973, retired CIA analyst Daniel Whitaker described in a private lecture at Georgetown University how certain German scientists arrived in Allied custody far too prepared, as though terms had been struck beforehand. No official record confirms Copper Star, but a single faded reconnaissance photograph, taken by an RAF Mosquito on July 31, 1944, shows 5 shadowed figures beside a parked Opel Blitz truck on St. Lo's runway. Annotated in red grease pencil are the words, "Unlogged presence." Possible exchange? The photo's edges are charred, suggesting someone tried to burn it before archivists salvaged the fragment. Today, St. Lo's airfield hums with civilian aviation, its history recast as a story of liberation. There is no plaque, no mention of a night when enemy and ally stood together under a ruined sky to trade lives and secrets. Operation Copper Star remains a ghost operation, its name absent from textbooks, its significance whispered only in the guarded halls of intelligence agencies. If Vogt's schematics shaped America's post-war missile programs or tilted the balance of the early space race, no official will admit it. The Pact at St. Lo was never meant to be known, its memory sealed under fresh tarmac and Cold War necessity. A forbidden alliance buried where bomb craters once marked the Earth. Chapter 3. Erased Soviet Betrayal in East Prussia. The winter of 1944 bled into 1945 with a cold that gnawed through bone and steel across East Prussia. Soviet forces under Marshal Rokossovsky pressed relentlessly westward, their banners promising liberation to oppressed peoples. Yet within the labyrinth of NKVD headquarters in Königsberg, a directive coded 712K revealed a darker reality. The Polish Home Army, or Armia Krajowa, had resisted Nazi occupation with guerrilla warfare and clandestine intelligence networks. As Germany's Eastern Front crumbled, Polish fighters sought to coordinate with Soviet forces to secure their homeland's future. But Stalin's regime viewed any independent Polish resistance as a threat to its designs on post-war Poland. On 17 December 1944, NKVD officers posing as Allied liaisons arranged a joint operation with the Polish units, an assault on retreating Wehrmacht positions near Königsberg's southern approaches. The rendezvous point was a frozen birch forest on the Pregel River's east bank, where snow blanketed artillery craters and the air reeked of cordite. Polish officers brought maps, ammunition, and a fragile hope of cooperation. At dusk, Soviet artillery batteries, secretly repositioned under cover of a snowstorm, opened fire not on the Germans, but on the Polish positions. Shells shrieked through the dark, tearing men and trees apart. Survivors fled into the white silence, some captured. Others executed on the spot. Captured NKVD dispatchers, briefly declassified in the chaotic 1990s, described the slaughter clinically. Operation complete. Units neutralized. Future stability ensured. One surviving Polish courier, Antoni Zielinski, later testified before an émigré tribunal in London, describing Soviet troops combing the forest with searchlights, bayonets gleaming under a pale moon. He remembered hearing Russian voices muttering, "No witnesses." British intelligence decrypts reportedly intercepted chatter about Directive 712K, but Churchill's war cabinet suppressed the information to avoid fracturing Allied unity ahead of Yalta. In his personal diary entry of 20 January 1945, Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden noted cryptically, "The Poles bled tonight, and we stayed silent." By the spring thaw, Soviet bulldozers had ploughed over the massacre site, constructing a forward supply depot. The earth hid splintered bones beneath barrels of ammunition and crates of Katyusha rockets. Post-war maps showed no record of the birch forest ambush. In 1952, Polish émigrés attempting to investigate were denied entry to the region, now under Soviet administration. A Polish priest who traveled covertly to Königsberg, by then renamed Kaliningrad, vanished without trace. His last letter home warned, "They have buried not just bodies, but the memory of a nation." The Yalta Conference in February 1945 sealed Poland's fate, placing it within the Soviet sphere of influence. Public revelation of Directive 712K would have undermined Allied unity, revealing that the USSR had eliminated potential Polish opposition before the war even ended. For decades, Polish history textbooks under communist rule omitted references to home army units in East Prussia. Families of the fallen were told their loved ones had died in combat with Germans. The betrayal festered quietly, whispered in kitchens and exile meetings, but never acknowledged by Moscow. In 1993, a brief window opened when Russian President Boris Yeltsin ordered partial declassification of NKVD records. Among the files surfaced an incomplete log listing AK units eliminated, Königsberg sector. Within weeks, access was rescinded, and researchers were warned that the documents had been misfiled. Western journalists who pursued the lead encountered closed doors. One German archivist who had seen the documents described them as shredded history, deliberately excised from the narrative of victory. Today, the forest along the Pregel River shows no scars. Young birch trees sway where artillery once screamed. Travelers to Kaliningrad see Soviet monuments and German ruins, but no marker for the Poles who died in a deception staged by supposed allies. Their erasure stands as a testament to the ruthless pragmatism of wartime politics. The betrayal at Königsberg was not recorded in parades or memorials. It lived only in fragments, damaged radio logs, a diary's cryptic line, a courier's trembling testimony. And even those fragments are fading, as time and politics conspire to smooth the jagged edges of a truth too dangerous for its era. Chapter 4. Hidden biological tests on Allied POWs. In the final chaotic months of World War II, as the Pacific Theater crumbled under Allied advances, a clandestine US Army intelligence report, buried deep within a sealed vault at Fort Detrick, chronicled horrors that official histories still refuse to acknowledge. The report, stamped Special War Department Memorandum 121, contained testimonies and intercepted transmissions detailing grotesque experiments conducted by Japan's infamous Unit 731 on captured Allied prisoners of war in occupied Manchuria. While Unit 731's atrocities against Chinese civilians are partially documented, the suffering of US, British, and Australian soldiers vanished under a calculated cover-up. The pages describe frostbite trials on shackled men exposed to sub-zero winds, live dissections performed without anesthesia, and the deliberate infection of POWs with plague and anthrax bombs dropped from low-flying aircraft over remote compounds near Pingfang. In August 1945, as the Soviet invasion of Manchuria accelerated, American intelligence officers intercepted fleeing Japanese medical officers and their crates of records. The OSS and later the newly formed Strategic Scientific Reserve, predecessor to the CIA, recognized the horrific but invaluable data these men carried. Rather than prosecute, US negotiators struck a deal: full immunity for Unit 731's leadership, including General Shiro Ishii, in exchange for their biological warfare findings. The agreement, quietly brokered through intermediaries in Tokyo, bypassed Allied command and was concealed even from British partners. American scientists soon integrated the stolen knowledge into early bioweapons research at Fort Detrick, Maryland. Internal memos from 1947 reveal discussions of field aerosolization methods and human endurance thresholds, phrased clinically, but sourced directly from torture. Among the most disturbing entries is a notation reading, "Data from live POW dissections, integrated into vector development." These details were never presented at the Tokyo war crimes trials. Instead, prosecutors dismissed or lost key evidence, and surviving Allied families were told their loved ones perished in anonymous camps or battlefield chaos. The cover-up extended into the 1950s, during Operation Paperclip's high-profile recruitment of German rocket scientists. The public focus on Nazi technology diverted attention from Japan's biological crimes. Declassified CIA cables from 1956 show internal concerns that Soviet agents had obtained partial Unit 731 records, potentially compromising US strategic advantage. A handwritten annotation on one cable reads, "We are stained with their blood. Keep sealed." By the time whispers of Unit 731 resurfaced in Cold War journalism, most primary witnesses were dead or discredited. Those who spoke out, such as former POW Thomas Vickers, were branded conspiracists. Vickers described frostbitten comrades whose blackened limbs were snapped off like twigs for study, but no major newspaper published his claims during his lifetime. In Japan, post-war reconstruction avoided deep examination of wartime atrocities to preserve national unity and secure US partnership against communism. Many former Unit 731 scientists quietly resumed medical careers. Some even rose to prominent positions in Japanese universities and pharmaceutical companies, their credentials untainted by their crimes. A 1981 Japanese television documentary briefly hinted at Allied POW experiments, but the broadcast was swiftly pulled and its footage lost under murky circumstances. Today, Pingfang is home to a modest museum acknowledging Unit 731's crimes, but its displays focus almost entirely on Chinese victims. The Allied soldiers who suffered there remain absent from plaques and timelines. The Fort Detrick report, partially leaked in the 1990s, remains heavily redacted, with entire pages blacked out. Historians who have viewed the surviving fragments insist the data was instrumental in shaping US biological warfare strategy during the Korean War era. The revelation is damning. Men who fought under Allied flags were sacrificed twice, first by their captors' cruelty, then by their own government's silence. The hidden biological tests on Allied POWs are a reminder that wartime pragmatism often tramples morality. The governments that silenced these crimes feared public outrage, diplomatic fallout, and the loss of an edge in a looming Cold War. Behind every sanitized history book and every denied document is a name erased, a body unburied, and a truth suppressed. The legacy of Unit 731 and its secret bargain is not merely a footnote, but a warning. Even victors can commit unforgivable betrayals when power outweighs principle. In the echoing silence of declassified vaults, the 4 erased files leave more questions than answers. Beneath Dresden's restored skyline, how many bones remain sealed beneath the swingers' foundations, uncounted and unnamed? At St. Lo, does the tarmac of a peaceful airfield still conceal the shadow of a forbidden handshake that reshaped the post-war arms race? In Kaliningrad's birch forests, do whispers of Polish voices still drift between the trees, reminders of an alliance betrayed for political convenience? And in the guarded halls of Fort Detrick, how many pages remain blacked out, shielding the bargain that stained nations with the blood of their own? These fragments, pried from the grip of secrecy, hint at a wider truth. History is not only written by the victors, it is edited, redacted, and sometimes deliberately erased. As you step back from these forbidden archives, one haunting thought persists. If these 4 files survived long enough to be glimpsed, how many others have been burned, shredded, or buried beyond recovery? The war's ghosts are not gone. They wait in silence, knowing their stories may surface again when the world is ready, or when someone dares to look deeper.